Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today we're going to be talking to artist, singer, educator, author, and illustrator Sondra Segundo. And we're going to be talking to her about her latest book. It's part of a series of children's books. As you know, we come here every Thursday talking to diverse creators of books for children and teens. And so we're so happy to have her join us today. Well, we have to have a different time, but we're always doing these interviews for you, and you can also find them on our Instagram afterwards and on our YouTube channel. Hello.
Ja.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I was just
It's an
doing
honor.
a little intro to you, but if you want to introduce yourself a little more and then tell us, as I mentioned, you're a singer, you're a cultural educator, an author and illustrator of children's books. What got you started on this path?
Well, Ja di talang gida kingwan hinudi kya ang. Um, I'm so honored to be here. Hello, my friends. My name is Gadal Kingwang is my Haida name. Sondra Segundo is my name. I started on this path of writing Haida children's books because I wanted my own children to be reflected in books. At the time, I worked with the Native Ed program in the Seattle Public Schools, and we were always on the hunt for good Indigenous children's books, and the ones that they had out there were written by non-natives, and that really bothered me. And I've always loved storytelling ever since I was a little girl, and so my kids were little at the time. I had three, you know, in grade school at the time, and I started writing the books so they could see themselves reflected in uh, literature. And so like my first book, Killer Whale Eyes, you can see my children in the book. I made sure as I was illustrating the books, they would always run in and check in on with me, and so they watched the whole process, and I'm like, there you are, honey. Now my granddaughter just loves the books too, and I didn't realize at the time how needed that was. And yeah, my tribal corporation published my first book, which
Oh, wow.
the Alaska Heritage Institute. So it was people really supported the work.
That's wonderful. And I'm really glad you mentioned the point about having books that are written by Native authors and with Native illustrators. And hello. And I would imagine, I mean, one, like you said, there just aren't enough books like that out there, but I would imagine it'd be even harder to find one from a specific group, like to find one that's Haida or a Haida language would be even harder to find. So that's so wonderful that you're doing it. And I know that preserving Haida culture and passing it on to the next generation is so important to you. How do your children's books help with that?
Well, for me, it keeps me engaged with my language. It keeps me engaged with the Haida language community. I'm constantly reaching out to our elders and language speakers for help. Like, help me. And they are so kind and loving and helpful. And the songs that came later. I just decided to include songs in my books in the Haida language, and that's how my elders taught us our language. When they went through the boarding school system, they learned songs there that they translated to our language, and it actually preserved our language during that difficult era. And just being able to use Haida words constantly, it helps me to remember. My books help me to remember, so I feel like it helps others that are really trying to learn the language. It's not an easy language. It's like any language. You just have to give it time and love.
Mm.
But once you start going with it, at first I never thought I'd be able to speak it or understand it, but I'm really starting to understand it and speak it. But our elders would always say "Dang di kuya dang de guam," which means "I love you, dear one," and or like my grandma would always say, House Luan, which means that's enough. As a wild girl, or Hawit Jada, come here, girl. And so she would naturally speak the language. And my both of my Haida grandparents on my mom's side, they spoke fluent. And so it was in me. It's in me. And so that's why I just felt, an obligation, a duty, a passion to do this work. I started seeing my language as my grandmother that was needed love and needed medicine and attention, and that's what our language needs. And at one point it was classified as critically endangered.
Mm,
um, Over 20 out of over 20 dialects, only 3 dialects survived: the Skidegate, Masset, and mine is the Alaskan dialect. And so it was just so important to me. It just, broke my heart. My elders really never talked about their experience. A few things here and there, like, you know, my grandma said that she was a good girl, so she never got punished, but her brother was bad, so he was always in trouble, and
mm,
he often tried to run away from the schools. So there's a lot of, after the truth started coming out, I feel like our elders were trying to protect us.
mm,
But unfortunately, generational trauma passes on. And so I really just, this was a way of being able to heal my heart and just help the future generations. And my mentor, my cousin Ben Young, he said, just remember who you're doing this for.
mm.
And I said, who? And I was like, our elders he's like, the children, the future. And it's true, because my granddaughter, she's 4 now, and she loves our books. She did attend the immersion preschool that my cousin started up in our village.
Mm,
And so she says Haida words here and there. She composes songs in Haida too.
mm.
She likes to get up on stage with me and her drum and share her songs. My children were too shy to do that, but my grandbaby loves it, and I'm just enjoying that. She's
Uh,
just so sweet, and her name is Huyajad, which means Raven Girl. So she received a Haida name, where in the past we would receive our, American name, and then our elders would give us our Haida names later.
mm,
But that. So Gadal Kingwan was a name that my great grandmother on my grandfather's side gave to me, her name, but she got a name, her Haida name. It's a clan name, comes from our family, and it's old and ancient, and she just is an old soul. She's so
yeah.
cute.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's so sweet. That must be so special to see her, really embracing the culture, and that this is something that you see this going forward into the future. Like you said, because I know. Well, tell us about your book, your latest book. As I mentioned, you've done several. You have the Lovebirds, the true story of Raven and Eagle. You have Killer Whale Eyes that you mentioned, and your new one is Kúndlaan, if I
Mhm.
said that right. But and you were telling me the actual meaning of the word, and maybe you
Mhm.
could share that with us and tell us a bit about the book.
Um, yes, this my book Kúndlaan is in the Haida, or in English and in Haida, which is my first books that I the first book that was fully translated to the Alaskan Haida dialect, which was so exciting for me. Kun means moon, and Glan means
Mm,
light. And it is a story inspired by a wolf pup, which is my own puppy. And she's right over there. And I always ask her, do you know that you're famous, Kúndlaan? And she just wags her tail. But she inspired this story because she came to us, and we took her in. She was rejected by 2 families, and so we took her in when she was only 6 months. um and she was full of anxiety because she's half Akita, half husky, and so Akitas get so attached to their humans. And so I would just sing this song to her, and she would just go in her little circle and lay down and calm down, and still to this day she does that, you know. And so I translated it. It's an old Scottish lullaby that my Chana, my grandpa, used to sing to us when we were babies. And so I translated it with one of another language warrior, and he helped me translate the whole book as well. But I translated that song and I sing that lullaby to her, and I also added another song, a Moon Mom song at the end, which I think I shared with you. I just made a video of it yesterday. So yeah, and it's just about a beautiful little wolf pup and her connection to Kúndlaan, which is the moon, and why wolf pups, big and small, howl at the moon and sing to the moon. And you know, I just went into my storytelling mode, and it's just so fun when I go into my storytelling mode because I build a whole world in my brain. You know, well, what is Moon Mom gonna? How does she eat? Where does she get her what? Where, you know? And so, you know, in my book, I added her little. She dug a fire well where she could get her heat. Because I just imagine like the kids, you know, what are they like? Where does she sleep? So I made a little bed for her, you know, made it cozy, and it also was inspired by my culture, my clan crest, the berry picker of the moon crest, which is an old story about you, you know, when our people, or the women, would go berry picking in the bright moonlight, and our elders taught us to sing loud so the bears know it's our turn to pick berries. And one of the women was singing so beautifully that the moon was admiring her so much that it began pulling her up into the moon's pull, and she felt herself being lifted from earth. And so she grabbed onto the salal berry branch. She held on with all her might, but the moon's pull was too strong, and she ended up on the moon. And so that's, you know, from that I was like, I wonder what she's doing up there. And then the art I created fit perfectly into the shadows of the moon. So when you look up at the next full moon, you could see the raven. She's from the Raven clan. You can cover her beak and you could see the human form. This is our art form called formline art, and it's like a language in itself. It tells the story of our people and our clans. That's in our totem poles and our canoes, and you could see her holding her berry picking basket. And so this is a family crest. It's a sacred crest that only our family can use, you know, and just like the double fin killer whale crest, but we all go under the same moiety, the Raven clan. Yeah, so it's all storytelling and just beautiful.
Well, when you came up with this story, I'm curious because you did the artwork and the text. So do you come up with the story first and then decide how to illustrate it, or does it come to you first in images and then you come up with the words, or is it kind of at the same time? What's that process like?
Well, my husband and I were driving. We went to Hawaii, and we were just driving, taking a long drive around the island. And he said, "Tell me a story." So I told him that story about Kúndlaan, and that's how it started. You know, it just was pouring out of me, and he really loved it. And it is also inspired by love. You know, it's kind of based on true events as well. You know, like about my husband and I's relationship. We met later in life, and we never had children together. We have children of our own, but we never had children together. And we always wished for a daughter. and then Kúndlaan came into our life, and you know, she's just our love for a baby, and we just love her. And she woke me up this morning singing. She waited outside the door for me to come out, and she just starts singing and telling me what she wanted. And so she's just our love for a baby. And yeah, and from there, you know, I wanted to have, you know, in the series of books, I wanted to have an ocean animal, an air animal with lovebirds, and then I wanted a land animal as well. And so the wolf became, and I was going back between the bear and the wolf, but then the wolf became the land animal. And I do have stories about bears. I write for ReadWorks as well. So I do have actually a story about Bear Son, and also a sequel to Killer Whale Eyes, that the children can log in and teachers can log into ReadWorks and find my stories. That, you know, I work with Ira Wolfman. He helps me and helps me edit my stories. So
Tell us more about ReadWorks.
ReadWorks is a platform that teachers can log into and measure their students' reading.
Mm-hmm.
And they called me, or they contacted me and asked me if I could start writing Indigenous stories for them.
Wow.
And Ira Wolfman, I don't know if you know him, but he's a children's book author as well. And he worked for Sesame Street, and he helps me edit my stories. Yeah, and so I think I've written 4 stories for them, and I've written a lot of stories. And so the ones that I didn't actually become books, because it takes a long time to
Sure.
finish and illustrate a book, you know, they don't have illustrations, just the words. And so the last story I wrote about Bear Son was for 8th graders, and the 3 other stories I wrote were for grade school. Yeah, so he really helps me edit those down, and includes the language, includes the culture and everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a great resource for teachers in the classroom. And um, I was actually, you mentioned the language. I was wondering about that because I saw on the website, which I'll be sure to include that when we post this on YouTube, the information how people can get your book, because I had a chance to read it. It is really wonderful, beautiful illustrations, as people have seen. But I noticed on there that it said that the Haida alphabet was only developed recently. And also, as you mentioned, a lot of this is, you know, a very strong oral storytelling tradition. So was it hard to kind of translate that, you know, storytelling that's done from person to person, and then figure out how to put it into a children's book?
Oh yeah, it was a challenge, but it was fun.
Mm.
You know, it was really fun. I enjoyed working with Rob Yates. He's my clan brother, and also is just giving his whole life to our language as well. And he really helped translate it. And yeah, our elders in the 70s, 60s and 70s helped to develop the alphabet with a linguist, and developed the Alaskan Haida Dictionary and phrasebook that has really, really helped me. Um, you know, and also they offer Haida language classes at University of Alaska Southeast,
Mm.
which really helped me get the sounds right.
Right.
Yeah, and it just takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I also taught for a semester at University of Alaska Southeast, the beginning Haida. I was like, really? Like, yeah, we want you to bring what you've been doing, you know. So I'm so thankful, because I quit my job with the Seattle schools to do this full time, and
Mm.
that was the hardest decision ever.
Right.
But I'm so glad I did it, because I wouldn't have Kúndlaan, I wouldn't have Lovebirds. I mean, it would have taken a lot longer. You know, it's hard to write and work full time and be an author and really dive into. So I'm every day I get up and I do Haida language work.
Mm. Well, that's amazing. I mean, that's so wonderful that you're able to devote yourself to that. And what kind of reaction have you gotten, especially from children, when they hear these stories and they are able to read these books? I know you talked about your granddaughter. You know, what other kinds of response have you got? I saw recently on social media about a school visit that you had done, and I know you said you've done a lot of that kind of work as well.
Yeah, I you know one a few times I love to do Q&A afterwards. I always want to leave room when I do an assembly, or you know, I just, you know, no question is too strange, or it's all about education and love. And you know, the kids raise their hand and they're like, that was actually a really good book, and they think that it's true. And you know, it's a good story when the kids think, they're like, is that a true story? You know, and I have to explain to them that it's fiction. But they, you know, they sent me all these beautiful thank yous.
Oh,
They sent me how to say thank you in my language, and it was just so
wow.
precious because, you know, I teach them some Haida words, and I like to get them speaking Haida, and they sent me a mountain of thank yous.
Oh,
You know, just talking about how they loved my story. What's the one with the girl who? Oh yeah, she. Oftentimes, children will be so inspired that they'll go back to their classrooms and draw and come up with their own wolf stories or orca stories or raven and eagle stories, and it's just, you know, so just so fills my soul so much. And you know, I also teach art, and you know, I teach step by step form line art. And I got a thank you note from one of the students, and she said, I didn't know that, you know, we can't use or practice indigenous art, you know, and that we should let the indigenous, or to sell it, to appropriate it, and to steal it. I didn't know that we were not supposed to steal indigenous art, and thank you for teaching me that. And I thought that was really important, you know, planting the seeds in the youth, about respecting our culture, and and just allowing us to share our culture in the natural way that we do, and the ancient way that was passed down to us, because we are still here, and our elders did teach us through all they went through. They still loved us and taught us, and you know,
and now you're getting to do that for the next generation. That's so special.
it just, yeah, you know, I love that saying, when you're doing what you love, it doesn't feel like work.
Right. Well, do you have any other, I mean, I know you mentioned that you had done some additional work on ReadWorks. Are you thinking of publishing any more stories or any more books?
Well, my publisher is, we're reimagining Lovebirds and Killer Whale Eyes, and those will be released soon. I'm currently redoing some of the artwork in my Lovebirds book, because at the time I wasn't as, you know, I went, it, form line art takes a lot of training. Like I said, it's like a language, and the shapes, and, you know, I was taught by a master form line artist how to fix some of my art. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm super excited about that. I'm also in a tribal funk band,
Right.
and we sing in our Haida and Tlingit languages, and we sing songs about healing. And we were just on the radio the other day. People are telling us that they're hearing us on the radio, and I'm singing. I'm a soloist as well. I'm doing a concert with Seattle Peace Chorus coming up.
Mm.
November is a busy month for me, which I love. And um, yeah, I just love bringing my Haida language into every space possible, every space possible. And, you know, after our shows, people say, I needed that. I really needed that, you know, because they can feel, you know, our ancestors, our culture, our love, and our healing as well. Because all this work that we do is a work of passion, but it just heals us so deep, you know. And that's, you know, why I started Haida Roots too. So, you know, we could find funding to work with the elders, to pay them well, to bring in elders to teach us our art forms, and our children, our youth are really grasping the art forms. And what we're seeing, you don't know what's going to happen when you start doing nonprofit work, but
Mhm.
what we're seeing is a rise in youth elders. So we
Oh,
hired a 19-year-old who understands the Raven's Tail art form that was almost an extinct art form. she understands it, and we hired her to come teach us, and she's an excellent teacher and very patient. And my daughter is teaching a moccasin making class
Mm.
soon for the tribe. You know, people are recognizing their talent, but also this is healing them. And my niece is like, auntie, can you do a class like this? Can you do a class like that? And so yes, the guan, yes, dear one, the guan, yes, dear one. You know, and it's coming from the youth, it's coming from the community. We were able to work with a fluent speaker of the Masset dialect before she passed away, and we captured a bunch of video of her, which is important for us to see her facial
Mm.
expressions and her gestures, and to hear her speaking our language fluent. And um, uh, you know, it's amazing that we're able to work with our elders before they leave, and their knowledge and their legacy will live on forever.
Well, and we'll include links to that because I know, as you mentioned, the nonprofit that you started, Haida Roots. And also, I want to say for anyone else who loves music, you have to go to Sondra's website, because as I was getting ready for this, I put on you, because you can listen to samples of her music on the website. I was listening to your music as I was like preparing the questions for this. And it's just so beautiful. And of course, for those of us who don't understand Haida, it doesn't matter. It's just that you can, like you say, you get the feeling and the emotion from it. And it's also very cool to hear the sound of the language, even if you don't understand the words of it. So I encourage everybody to do that, and we will include those links um, in it. And thank you. Sorry, just going back to see um, some of the comments. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It was so lovely to talk with you. As I mentioned, we'll include the link to your latest book. It's really a beautiful book, so I encourage everybody to get themselves a copy of it. Thank you for joining us today.
And also consider buying the Haida version so you can help perpetuate my beautiful language. There's two versions, and a lot of people haven't been buying this version, but it's just really important. You'll help me as perpetuate our language.
Great point. And thanks to everybody who's watching. If you joined us late, this will be up in just a few minutes on
Mhm.
Instagram and later on our YouTube channel. And on YouTube, we'll make sure to include all of the links that we mentioned. So thank you. Bye, everybody.
Ha'atui, ha'aditalang.